You know that moment when you realize your entire life has been shaped by people who were supposed to protect you, but instead they were just waiting for their chance to profit off you? That's exactly where I found myself. For years, I thought my family wanted the best for me. I thought their criticisms, their tough love, their constant warnings about how business isn't for people like us came from a place of care. But I was wrong. So very wrong. Because one day I opened an email that wasn't meant for me, and discovered that my own family, the people who raised me, the people who shared my childhood dinners and birthdays, had been quietly trying to sell the very company I had built from scratch. My company, my dream, my blood, sweat, and tears. And the price they were willing to settle for? Just $2 million. At the time, $2 million sounded huge, but what they didn't understand was that this wasn't just a project. It wasn't just a business idea I had thrown together in my spare time. It was the culmination of years of grinding, of staying up till 3 a.m., of turning rejection into motivation. And the punchline? Google would later come along and offer me $3 billion for that same company. But by then, it was too late for my family. They had already shown me who they really were. I grew up in a family where money was always complicated. We weren't poor, not exactly. My dad had a stable job, my mom worked part-time, and my older brother was always the golden child. He played sports, got good grades, and made my parents proud. Me? I was the quiet one, the kid who took apart old radios just to see how the wiring worked. The one who preferred spending hours sketching ideas for apps instead of hanging out with friends. Why can't you be more like your brother? My mom used to sigh whenever she found me hunched over a laptop. Sports build character. This tech stuff, it's just screens. They didn't get it. But my fascination with technology wasn't just a phase. By high school, I had already built my first functioning app, a clunky, ugly-looking thing that helped students swap used textbooks. It barely worked, but it got downloads. And for me, that was magic. For the first time, I realized I could create something that solved problems, something that lived beyond me. My parents didn't see it that way. Focus on school, my dad said when he walked into my room one evening, seeing me buried in code. These side hobbies won't pay bills. Still, I kept going. Late nights, empty Red Bull cans stacking up on my desk, scribbled notes taped to my walls, like I was plotting some kind of conspiracy. I was obsessed. And by college, I had the seed of an idea that would eventually change my life. The startup was born out of frustration. One night, after a brutal group project where nobody communicated properly, I thought, why is collaboration still so messy? Why can't people organize, share files, and track progress seamlessly in one space without needing 5 different apps? That's where my platform idea came from. A streamlined collaboration hub, something lightweight, intuitive, and scalable. I didn't have funding, I didn't have connections. All I had was my laptop, a dorm room desk, and an insane drive. The first version was ugly, buggy, half the features didn't even work properly. But I tested it with classmates, then professors, then small businesses, and slowly it started to click. People didn't care if it wasn't perfect. They cared that it worked better than what they had before. That was my first taste of validation. But validation didn't mean my family suddenly respected me. In fact, it only made things worse. Still wasting your time? My dad asked when he walked into my room one evening, seeing me buried in code. You should be studying for real exams, not playing pretend CEO. My mom chimed in. Your brother is applying for law school. Do you want to fall behind him your whole life? It was always the same. My brother was the pride, I was the disappointment. And yet, when they needed free tech support, guess who they ran to? When their phones glitched, when their emails wouldn't load, when my dad's work presentation got corrupted, suddenly I wasn't the useless kid anymore. But heaven forbid I mention my startup in a serious conversation. By my second year of college, my platform had grown to about 5,000 active users. Small businesses were reaching out. I was broke, exhausted, and half living off instant noodles, but I had something real, something alive. That's when the shift happened. Suddenly, my parents weren't mocking me as much. They started asking questions like, how much money can this project of yours make? Are there investors? Do you own the rights? At first, I thought maybe they were finally proud. Maybe after years of dismissing me, they finally saw my value. But I was naive, because the truth was, they didn't care about the dream. They cared about the dollar signs. And when they realized my company was worth something, their true colors began to show. I'll never forget the day I overheard my dad on the phone. I had just come home from campus, exhausted after pulling an all-nighter debugging a new feature. As I walked past the living room, I heard my dad speaking in a low tone. Yes, it's his project, but he's young. He doesn't understand these things. If you handle the paperwork, we can finalize at $2 million. No, he doesn't need to know. It'll be better this way. He'll thank us later. My stomach dropped. $2 million? Sell my company? Behind my back? I froze in the hallway, trying to process. My own father negotiating to sell everything I had worked for? That was the first crack in the illusion I had built in my head. The illusion that deep down, my family wanted the best for me. I was wrong. From there, things only got darker. But that's a story for the next part. Because if you think betrayal from strangers hurts, wait until you hear what it feels like when it comes from your own blood.
You know how sometimes you can sense when something is off, even before you have proof? That's how the days after overhearing my dad's phone call felt. Every word, every glance, every half smile from my parents suddenly seemed laced with something else. Something I couldn't quite name at first, until I realized what it was: calculation. For years, they had dismissed me, called my passion a waste of time, compared me to my brother every chance they got. But now they were acting strangely polite, supportive even. My mom started bringing me snacks while I worked late. My dad asked more questions about my progress. They even started bragging to relatives about me. "Did you know he has an app with thousands of users?" my mom told an aunt over the phone. "He's going to be the next Zuckerberg." I should have felt proud, but instead their tone made me uneasy. It wasn't admiration, it was opportunism. And the uneasiness only grew stronger. One night, while I was in the kitchen grabbing water, I noticed my mom's tablet charging on the counter. The screen lit up with an incoming email notification. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. I wasn't raised that way. But the subject line made my stomach twist. Subject: draft agreement, acquisition terms. Against every instinct, I tapped it open. And there it was. A PDF draft of a contract between my parents and a group of interested buyers. The business they were describing was unmistakably mine. The wording claimed they were representatives of the company and had the right to negotiate on my behalf. The number slapped in bold across the first page: $2 million. My throat dried. The lies leapt off the screen at me. Representatives? They weren't on the registration documents. They hadn't written a single line of code. They hadn't answered a single customer support ticket or pulled an all-nighter fixing bugs. This wasn't their company. It was mine. But in black and white, they were positioning themselves as the ones in control. I remember my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the tablet. For a moment, I thought, maybe this is just a misunderstanding. Maybe they just wanted to help me, to take the stress off my shoulders. But as I scrolled, that illusion crumbled. The contract spelled it out clearly. Once signed, ownership would transfer, and the seller, aka my family, would pocket the $2 million. My name wasn't even mentioned in the financial breakdown. The only thing included was a vague clause: original developer will receive an advisory role and stipend. In other words, I would be pushed aside in the very company I had bled for, reduced to a glorified employee. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, replaying every insult my parents had ever thrown at me. "Stop wasting your time. Your brother will do something real with his life. Sports and law school are respectable. Coding is just screens. They never believed in me, not once. And now, the second my project showed potential, they swooped in like vultures, ready to cash out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront them immediately, slam the tablet on the table and demand answers. But something inside me, maybe survival instinct, told me to wait. If they had already lied enough to draft contracts behind my back, confronting them empty-handed would only make them more careful. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. The days that followed felt like living in a play where everyone else knew the script but me. My parents continued their fake smiles. My brother, who had always been smug, now seemed unusually interested in my business. He'd throw questions at me like, "So, how many investors have you talked to? Would you ever consider selling? You know, $2 million is a lot of money for someone your age." The way he emphasized "someone your age" made my skin crawl. That's when I realized he was in on it too. Maybe he wasn't directly handling the paperwork, but he knew. They had all been discussing it behind closed doors. My own flesh and blood conspiring to sell my life's work. The breaking point came at dinner one evening. My dad set down his fork, cleared his throat, and said casually, "You know, son, sometimes it's better to take a good offer early before things get complicated. $2 million could set you up for life. You could pay off debts, buy a car, maybe even put a down payment on a house. Think about it." I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. So this was it. They weren't even hiding it anymore. My mom chimed in, "You could still work for the company after selling. Less stress, steady pay. It's safer that way." Safer. That word hit me like a slap. They wanted safe, predictable, easy. They couldn't see beyond the immediate dollar signs. But me? I hadn't built this company for safe. I built it because I believed it could change things. Because I had poured years of myself into it. And here they were, treating it like a lottery ticket they could cash out whenever they pleased. I forced myself to stay calm. I pushed my food around my plate and nodded like I was thinking it over. Inside, though, I was boiling. That night, I copied the email and the draft contract onto my own drive. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, backups, user growth charts, registration papers with my name as the sole founder. If my family wanted a fight, I was going to be ready. But even as I built my case, I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust. The people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders were actively trying to cut me out of my own dream. And the worst part? They thought they were entitled to it. Like my years of grinding, my sleepless nights, my sacrifices somehow belonged to them. The betrayal was complete. But I wasn't about to roll over and let them win. What none of them realized was that my company's true value hadn't even begun to show. They thought $2 million was the peak, but in reality, it was just the beginning. And when the real storm came, the one that would put my startup on Google's radar, they would finally understand just how badly they had underestimated me.
The next few weeks were like living in two parallel universes. On the surface, everything looked normal. I'd eat breakfast with my parents, listen to my mom fuss over my brother's law classes, and nod politely as my dad bragged about my cousin's new promotion. But beneath that thin layer of routine, the air was poisoned. Because I knew the truth. And every time my dad looked at me like a chess piece to be moved, every time my brother smirked like he was already spending money that wasn't his, I had to bite my tongue to keep from exploding. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. I had proof saved. I had backups and documentation, but I knew something deeper. Words alone wouldn't be enough. Even if I laid the truth in front of them, they'd twist it. They'd say they were just looking out for me. They'd say I was paranoid. I didn't just need to defend myself, I needed to win. So I threw myself back into the startup with a kind of desperation I'd never felt before. The betrayal lit a fire in me. Every sleepless night, every bug fix, every grueling call with a potential partner, it wasn't just work anymore. It was war. I doubled down on growth. I started studying analytics like my life depended on it. I reached out to angel investors who had ignored me months earlier and sent them detailed progress reports. I hired 2 interns, kids from my college's computer science department who believed in what I was building. My parents noticed, of course. They mistook my drive for anxiety. My mom would sigh and say, "Sweetie, maybe you should relax. Don't overwork yourself. We'll handle the big decisions." We'll handle the big decisions. Every time she said it, the betrayal cut deeper. The first big clash came one Friday evening. I had just gotten off a Zoom call with a potential investor who was interested in a $500K seed round. My heart was pounding. I knew this was the start of something real. I walked downstairs, buzzing with excitement, ready to tell someone. Maybe, just maybe, I thought, a small part of my parents would finally be proud. Instead, I walked into the living room to find them with printed copies of the contract. My brother was there too, leaning back in his chair like a king waiting for his crown. My dad looked up at me, all business. "Sit down, we need to finalize this before the opportunity disappears." I froze. "Finalize what?" "The sale," he said, as if it were obvious. "The $2 million offer. They want an answer soon. This is life-changing money, son. Don't be foolish." I laughed. I actually laughed even though my chest was burning. "You mean my company? The one that you have no right to sell?" My brother rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic. You're acting like you built the next Facebook. Be realistic. $2 million is probably the best you'll ever get. Take it before it all crashes." The arrogance in his voice made my fists clench. I stared at them, the people I had once trusted more than anyone. "You think you get to decide this without me? You think you own this?" My dad slammed his hand on the table. "We are your parents. We raised you. Everything you have is because of us. That company exists because we let you stay under our roof, eat our food, live rent-free. Don't you dare act like we don't have a stake." My mom nodded along, her eyes cold. "We sacrificed for you. This is our payoff too." My throat felt tight. So all the nights I stayed up until sunrise coding, all the classes I skipped to meet deadlines, all the stress and doubt, I guess none of that counts because you think feeding me dinner means you own my work? The silence that followed was suffocating. My dad leaned back, his jaw tight. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sign or you'll regret it." I didn't sign. Instead, I went back upstairs, shaking with rage, and sent an email to the investor who had shown interest earlier. I told him I was in. That decision changed everything. Within 2 months, I had my first real funding secured. $500,000 wired into the business account, with my name alone on the paperwork. Suddenly, I wasn't just a kid with a laptop. I was a founder with investors behind me. And my family hated it. The shift in their behavior was almost comical. At first, they tried guilt. "Don't shut us out. We're just trying to help." When that didn't work, they tried intimidation. My brother sneered about how greedy I was. My dad lectured me about family loyalty. But I kept going, because every insult, every cold shoulder, every attempt to undermine me, it only fueled me more. By the end of that year, my startup had grown from a handful of users to over 200,000 active accounts. The revenue was still modest, but the growth rate was undeniable. Industry blogs started writing about us. Bigger investors reached out. And then came the email that made my heart stop. It was from a senior product manager at Google. He'd heard about us, seen the growth charts, and wanted to discuss potential opportunities. I remember staring at the screen, my hands trembling the same way they had when I first saw that betrayal contract. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was possibility. I didn't tell my family yet, because I knew how they'd react, and I wanted them to hear about it the same way the rest of the world would.
in headlines they could never ignore.
When I first read that email from Google, I thought it had to be a scam. I reread it 5 times, checked the sender address 3 more, and even copied it into a search bar to make sure it wasn't some elaborate phishing scheme. But no, this was real. Someone at Google had noticed me. The kid my family had laughed at, the waste of space who was told to quit, the one they'd tried to cut out for $2 million. Now I had one of the biggest companies in the world knocking on my digital door. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I paced my office, my mind running faster than my body could keep up. What did they want? Were they looking to acquire us, partner with us, crush us before we got too big? My investors advised caution. Don't let the excitement blind you. Take your time, negotiate carefully. Companies like Google play chess while everyone else plays checkers. But deep down, I felt it. This was the moment. This was the door that had cracked open, the one I had fought to reach even when my own family tried to slam it shut. So I replied, yes, let's set up a call. The first Zoom meeting was surreal. A group of polished Google executives sat in their minimalist conference rooms, smiling at me through my secondhand laptop camera. Your growth metrics are impressive, one of them said. We've been watching you for a while. The way your platform scales with minimal overhead, it's innovative. I tried to act calm, professional, but inside I was screaming. Google thinks I'm innovative. The meeting ended with them saying they wanted to explore possibilities, which in tech speak could mean anything. Still, it was enough to light me up. Meanwhile, my family had no clue. They were still busy complaining about how I never came to dinner, how I was arrogant and selfish. My brother mocked me openly on social media. LOL, some people think an app with a few users makes them Steve Jobs. I didn't reply. I didn't clap back. I didn't even tell them about the meetings, because I wanted the silence to speak louder than any words. The next few months were chaos, in the best way possible. Google's interest sent shockwaves through the startup world. Other investors started reaching out, afraid of missing the boat. Articles popped up on TechCrunch and Wired speculating about our potential acquisition. My tiny office suddenly felt like the control center of a rocket ship. The interns who had started with me, kids who believed when no one else did, now worked full-time. We were pushing out updates weekly, servers buzzing, customer support tickets pouring in faster than we could answer. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline, but I had never felt more alive. Of course, my family eventually got wind of it. One morning, my dad stormed into my office without knocking, holding a printout of an article, Google Eyes Small But Growing Tech Startup. The headline practically glowed. His face was red. Why am I reading about this in the news? Why didn't you tell me? I looked up from my desk, calm, collected, because it's none of your business. My mom gasped like I'd slapped her. Don't speak to your father like that. I stood, meeting his glare head-on. You tried to sell my company for $2 million behind my back. You wanted me out, so forgive me if I don't feel like sharing updates anymore. My brother, who had followed them in, smirked. You think Google is really gonna buy your junk? You'll be lucky if they don't laugh you out of the room. I smiled. We'll see. But behind closed doors, I wasn't as calm as I pretended to be. Because the truth was, negotiations with Google were brutal. They pushed, they pulled, they tested. They offered partnerships, licensing deals, and even floated a talent acquisition where they'd buy me out and shut the company down. But I held firm. I had one number in my head. One number that symbolized all of the sleepless nights, all the insults, all the betrayal. 3 billion. It sounded insane to even me, but deep down, I knew the potential. I knew what we had built wasn't just some small app. It was scalable, disruptive, and, if nurtured correctly, worth every cent. The climax came during an in-person meeting at Google's Mountain View headquarters. I'll never forget walking into that glass-walled conference room wearing a suit that barely fit, facing down a dozen executives who could buy and sell my entire city without blinking. They laid out their terms. $2 billion.
It was more money than I had ever dreamed of. My investors looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I said calmly, no. The room went silent. One of the executives leaned forward. This is a serious offer. Most founders your age would jump at it. I met his gaze. Most founders didn't build this with their entire family rooting for them to fail. Most founders didn't have to fight tooth and nail just to keep their own company. I know what this is worth. $3 billion or nothing. For a moment, I thought I had just destroyed everything. But then, to my shock, the executive smiled. You remind me of us, 20 years ago. 2 weeks later, the deal was signed. Google acquired my company for $3 billion. $3 billion. I sat in my tiny office, soon to be replaced by a sprawling campus, staring at the wire transfer confirmation on my screen. Tears blurred my vision. Not just because of the money, not even because of the validation, but because I finally had the answer to every insult, every dismissal, every betrayal. When the news broke, my family's reaction was predictable. My phone lit up with calls from my mom, texts from my dad, voicemails from my brother. Suddenly, the same people who told me I was wasting my life were desperate to be part of it. You should come home so we can celebrate. We always knew you had it in you. Family sticks together, right? I didn't apply. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. I didn't owe them anything. Not my success, not my money, not my forgiveness. They had made their choice when they tried to sell me out for $2 million, and I had made mine when I walked away.
The morning after the deal closed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that somehow tasted different, richer, stronger. Or maybe it was just the weight off my shoulders, the knowledge that I had finally done it. I opened my inbox to a flood of congratulations. Investors, old classmates, journalists, even complete strangers who had read about the deal online. Everyone wanted a piece of my time. Everyone, it seemed, except the people who had once mocked me. Oh wait, scratch that. Because when I checked my phone, there were dozens of missed calls from my family. At first, I ignored them. I told myself I was too busy, that I didn't owe them any explanation or conversation. But the messages kept coming. My mom left a long voicemail, her voice trembling. Honey, we just want to celebrate with you. We're so proud of you. We've always believed in you. My dad's text was shorter, almost businesslike. We should talk. You need experienced people to help manage all that money. And my brother? His message was pure entitlement. Yo, man, congrats. We should get matching cars. Family wins together, right? I stared at the screen in disbelief. Family wins together? These were the same people who had laughed when I pitched my idea, who had secretly tried to sell me out for $2 million behind my Mac, who had told me over and over that my future belonged in the shadow of my brother. Now suddenly they were proud? Suddenly they were family again? No, not anymore. Weeks passed, and life transformed faster than I could process. Google moved us into a new headquarters. My team grew from a scrappy group of 6 into a bustling department of 60. I had advisors, assistants, accountants, things I used to dream about when I was eating instant noodles in a dark apartment. And yet, despite everything, a small part of me couldn't shake the bitterness. Because every time I walked past the new office glass doors with my name etched on them, I remembered how close it had all been to slipping away. If I had given in, if I had walked away, if I had listened to them, but I didn't. And now the tables had turned. The true irony hit a few months later. My parents' finances weren't as strong as they'd always pretended. They had stretched themselves thin covering my brother's lifestyle, his expensive car, his failed business ventures, his endless partying. The very money they had stolen from me years ago was gone, wasted on keeping him afloat. So one day, my dad called me, not to congratulate me, not to apologize, but to ask for help. "We're struggling a bit," he said, his tone cautious. "The mortgage is tight. Your brother's having trouble with his payment. We thought, since you're in a better position now, maybe you could step in." I almost laughed. After all the speeches about how my inheritance was meant for my brother, now they were coming to me with their hands out. I took a deep breath and said, "I'll help, but on one condition." "What's that?" my dad asked. "You pay me rent. From now on, the house is mine." Silence. Pure, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then my dad sputtered, You can't be serious. This is our family home." "Exactly," I said calmly. "It was supposed to be mine, remember? But you used everything for him. You made your choice. Now this is mine. And if you want to stay, you'll pay rent, just like any other tenant." My mom begged. My brother screamed. But I stood firm. And within a month, the papers were signed. The deed to the house, their house, was transferred to me. The first day I walked through the front door as the owner, my dad refused to meet my eyes. My mom cried quietly at the kitchen table. And my brother, who once bragged about his dream car, now sulked in the corner like a child. I didn't move in. I didn't redecorate. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was mine was enough. Every month, like clockwork, the rent payment arrived in my account. Money that once would have gone to my brother's luxuries now lined my pocket instead. And the best part, they couldn't complain because they had made this bed themselves. Did I feel guilty? Honestly, a little. There were nights when I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had gone too far, if maybe I should have been the bigger person like my mom always preached. But then I'd remember Christmas mornings where my brother got the big presents and I got nothing. The nights I stayed up coding while they told me I was wasting my life. The day I found out they tried to sell me out for $2 million like I was disposable. And the guilt would vanish. Because forgiveness is one thing, forgetting is another. Years later, my story became a kind of legend in the tech world. People would whisper about the founder who refused $2 billion, who demanded $3 billion and got it. Journalists wrote profiles about my gutsy gamble. Students studied my company in business classes. But to me, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the billions. It was in the quiet, personal justice of knowing that the same people who once called me a burden now couldn't survive without me. The rent checks kept coming, month after month, year after year. Proof, every time I opened my account, that I had turned their betrayal into my power. And so, here's the truth I carry with me. Sometimes family doesn't believe in you. Sometimes they laugh, dismiss, or even sabotage you. But their disbelief doesn't define you. What defines you is the choice to keep building, keep fighting, keep believing even when no one else does. And if you're lucky, one day, you'll stand tall enough that the very people who doubted you will look up in disbelief, forced to admit they were wrong. I didn't just build a company. I didn't just earn billions. I rewrote the story my family tried to script for me. And in the end, that was worth more than any deal, Google or otherwise.